And no, I'm not going to talk about Uncle Stephen Let's facial expressions. I'd love to, because in the speech he gave, he made a really weird self-reference. Stick around till the end, because there's a ton that could be said about this broadcasting, but we're going to focus, lightly and with a touch of humor, on just 3 things. First, I'll highlight a major scientific mistake that I'm pretty sure Uncle Let has no clue about. Second, we'll talk about a lie he told, but of course in classic Watchtower fashion, a camouflaged lie. Third, we'll talk about a new project launched by the governing body to supposedly help their flock find treasures in the Bible. But does it really do what they claim? Or is it just another shallow, out-of-context interpretation from the governing body? Before we begin, if you're new here, just so you know, the voice you're about to hear was generated using artificial intelligence. However, the content itself doesn't come from an automated system. Every word was written entirely by the creator of this channel. You can call me Nowachi. Let's get started. We're diving straight into the first point, the science mistake. Listen closely to Uncle Let.
Eons and eons ago, Jehovah God was all alone. And even though it's impossible for us to comprehend, he wasn't lonely or lacking anything, but because of love, he generously chose to share the gift of life with others.
Stephen, I know you didn't go to college, but if the Watchtower, or as some of us like to call it, the Nowachi, is swimming in money, couldn't they at least hire a scientific advisor? I'm sure there's some witness out there willing to work like a slave with no benefits. Sorry, slip of the tongue, as a Beth elite. Let me break it down for you. According to relativity, time and space don't exist separately. They form what's called space-time. And that space-time makes no sense without matter or energy to warp it. Einstein put it this way: matter tells space how to curve, and space-time tells matter how to move. No matter, no curvature. No curvature, no time. No tick, no talk. Just eternal emptiness, kind of like the arguments in your broadcasting. And if that wasn't enough, in quantum physics, you can't even talk about time without a physical system evolving. In other words, time emerges from the quantum changes in matter. So no, there's no such thing as time without matter, because time doesn't just float around like some independent spirit. That only happens in Watchtower publications. Which means, as you yourself said, even if it's hard for you to grasp, if God hadn't created matter yet, then time didn't exist either. There were no millions of years where God was just sitting alone in the universe staring into the void. That's why, for philosophers, if God exists, he's not part of time. He transcends it. But of course, having a philosophical conversation with you is impossible, because in your world, philosophy is from the devil. Let's move on to the second point. As you listen to Uncle Let, try to spot the lie.
If our brother lacks food, clothing, or shelter, we don't just say, "Go in peace, keep warm, and well fed." No, we apply Proverbs 3:27, which says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom you should give it, if it is within your power to help." In addition to helping brothers in need directly, we can indirectly help them by making donations to the worldwide work. The governing body prayerfully strives to use wisely these precious, dedicated funds to help our dear brothers who've been afflicted by natural or man-made disasters.
Did you catch that? Now it turns out the Nowachi helps its sheep with its own money when they're victims of natural or man-made disasters. If you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you've ever been through a natural disaster, you might be thinking, but they did help me. What they didn't tell you is that the help wasn't funded by Watchtower money. They organized a collection among the local witnesses near the affected area, and that's where it all came from. It's like if you asked a friend for money to make a donation, never pay them back, and then went around bragging about how generous you are with those in need. Believe me, it's easier to pull a molar from a sleeping lion using toothpicks than to get direct help from the Watchtower. But this is where the Watchtower's twisted cunning kicks in. They drop a truth that, without saying it outright, makes you think it confirms what they said earlier. That way, they manage to give the impression they did something they actually didn't do, all without technically telling a lie. Listen closely to what Uncle Led, aka the fastest liar in the West, said right after claiming they helped their sheep during natural disasters.
Dedicated funds to help our dear brothers who've been afflicted by natural or man-made disasters and who urgently need suitable kingdom halls and assistance in many other ways. Speaking of the need for kingdom halls, as just one example, please look at these pictures from the Philippines. Here are 6 before and after photographs. And what do you think was the individual average cost of these 6 new, simplified, but dignified kingdom halls? $21,000 US.
Now everything becomes clear. The Watchtower's grand act of help was rebuilding its own kingdom halls. That's the so-called humanitarian work they want to pass off as aid to their sheep. And when I say their halls, I mean the ones that now legally belong to the Watchtower. Because let's not forget, not long ago, the Nowachi according to them, the congregations voluntarily ceded ownership of all the kingdom halls. Before that, those halls belonged to the local congregation, which could decide whether to sell, renovate, or build. Now, they have zero control. Everything belongs to the Watchtower. All that was missing was for the congregations to have to rebuild the halls they gifted to the organization. And of course, those properties are insured. So no, the Watchtower didn't rebuild out of love or generosity. They just cashed an insurance and done. But do you see how we basically have to perform a forensic dissection of what they say just to avoid falling for their tricks? Meanwhile, the average witness, always ready to trust the governing body, is still convinced the Watchtower is a loving organization that cares for them. Like a mother who charges you rent, food, and cleaning, demands that you help cover her own expenses, and then tells you to appreciate all the sacrifices she's making for you. Thanks, Mommy Watchtower. Always so generous with what isn't yours. Now, let's move on to the governing body's new project. A brand new segment in the broadcasting that promises to help you find hidden treasures in the Bible. This time, they've uncovered massive hidden treasures in the book of Hosea. And no, newbie witness, Hosea isn't some new urban clothing brand. It's a book of the Bible. Let's listen closely.
But we can start to dig deeper by asking some questions.
Asking questions is such a fundamental step in digging for treasures.
Indeed, asking good questions is an art that, when practiced well, can lead us to the truth. The Greek philosopher Socrates knew this, which is why he developed what we now call the Socratic method, a style of dialogue based on questions that invite us to think, to reflect, to question. Oh, but wait, I almost forgot that philosophy, according to some, is part of the system of the world ruled by Satan the devil. Silly me. So let's set Socrates aside and move on to something far more upbuilding. Let's take a look at the deep questions these spirit-directed men have prepared to help us find hidden treasures in the biblical book of Hosea.
So, for example, how did Jehovah choose to start Hosea's prophetic career? Hosea 1:2 says, "Go, marry a woman of prostitution, and have children of prostitution."
Yeah, can you imagine? The first thing that Jehovah tells you as a prophet is that he wants you to marry a woman who's going to be unfaithful to you. I wonder how he felt.
Sorry, I was left speechless. Seriously? The best question this man could come up with is, what might Hosea have felt when a woman who practiced prostitution was unfaithful to him because God forced him to marry her? I'm sorry, but I'm at a loss for words. All right then, let's keep uncovering treasures.
What was his initial response?
What went through his mind, knowing that marital infidelity awaited him? Many who have gone through that circumstance say that it's an excruciating and devastating experience.
But that's not all. That verse also mentions have children of prostitution. So there were children involved. Hosea and Gomer had a son together, but later Gomer had 2 other children, likely out of wedlock. I wonder what that was like for Hosea.
Right? And if they weren't his, when did he find out? How did he feel taking care of these children?
All right, forgive me, but I'm honestly ashamed to belong to the same biological species as this man. The best he can come up with is, how might Hosea have felt enduring not just the humiliation of being cheated on again and again and again, but also having to care for and support the children of another man, all because God forced him to marry a prostitute, knowing full well everything that was going to happen. And these are the hidden treasures uncovered by the so-called Bible scholars. Scratch that, by the Spirit-anointed wise men of the Watchtower. But hey, I can already picture the response. The problem is you, because you lack spiritual discernment. Look, I'm not the one who should be bending over backwards, trying to justify what the Bible says. But wouldn't it be much easier, and honestly more sensible, to say that this is an allegorical story? A way of expressing that God loved his people so much, he was willing to forgive all their unfaithfulness, instead of taking the story literally, and ending up with a bunch of questions that do nothing but make a mockery not only of the governing body, but even of the Bible itself. Before we finish, let me share something with you. For some reason I don't quite understand, the algorithm hasn't been giving much visibility to this channel's videos. So if you believe this is content worth sharing, something others should see, you can support my work by sharing, leaving a like, and subscribing to the channel. Your support truly makes a difference. See you soon.